Hello, this is Alex Levin, the co-founder and CEO of Regal, and I'm here with my co-founder, Rebecca. So today we wanted to chat a little bit about starting a new company in the generative AI era. So when we got going, really generative AI wasn't at a place where it materially impacted what we were thinking about, as we started the company. But, our friends that are starting today, I'd say the number one question they get from investors beyond, are they using AI in their product for their customers is how are they using generative AI to change the way they're building their company? And sometimes this is framed by, a few people. And so Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, often likes to frame it this way is, when will there be a company with one employee and $1 billion of revenue, right? How much can generative AI do the job of a company so that you don't need as many employees perhaps to generate as much revenue? So I don't know, as you think about this, Rebecca, where are the places maybe that you think you could use generative AI today as you start a company?
I certainly think at the very early phases when we were doing more ideation around the company and more research and trying to validate like our hypotheses about the company, that's an area where we took a lot of our own time to do it. And I think we could have, I would have never thought to outsource that to a consultant, but I would think about just giving ourselves much more leverage and productivity in that. So that might have been like researching competitors and what their products are able to do. We had to do hundreds of demos of competitors to convince ourselves that our vision for how we were doing things would be really different. And I think that could have gone much faster as an example. That's one area I think about. I also think, about even just building our products, I think we probably would have hired much, much slower on the engineering side than we did initially for the business.
So you think today basically the AI, sort of generative AI tools allow engineers to be much more efficient in what they're doing?
I think it allows them to be much more efficient. So I think you get way more output and leverage from a single engineer. That engineer still has to be a great founding engineer who can do many different things. That doesn't change that. But I think about at the beginning of our company, there was, yeah, some just like POCs that engineers, like our best engineers had to do. And it's those kinds of things where, again, I never would have thought to contract it out on a marketplace, but where I think like we can now find AI agents or build AI agents who could have like created a lot of those POCs for
Those
us.
basic apps, yeah. I mean, definitely the other one for us is like we made a decision very early because we're in the contact center world that there would be human agents that would sit at our customers. There were plenty of people coming to us and saying, "Hey, can you just do this for us?" And in a world where like we didn't want to hire human agents, that was impossible. But in a world where you have AI agent, it changes. So there have been a number of posts recently that I like that basically are saying software companies used to use software to do a job for their customer and it was limited because it was only software. But now that there's generative AI that can replicate a lot of the tasks of humans, you can actually take off, bite a bigger chunk of stuff off. So instead of just like the software that helps with sending a text, you can actually write the text or maybe the one that responds to the next text or plans what's the next best action. And so that allows you to then take more of the job to be done from the customer and potentially charge the customer more for it as well. So I think like it would have changed the way we looked at the product we built. And so I see that a lot in early stage startups now that our friends are building, where instead of biting off just the software piece, they're going after both the software and the labor cost or revenue, whichever way you want to look at it, which changes the dynamic of like what they're building. And then I think also a lot about what we're starting to see now, where like we have built within the marketing org, basically like the Regal LLM, like you can effectively give it stuff and it'll like write it in our voice. I mean, that would have saved so much time. Like if we could have had the like Alex and Rebecca LLM and like started writing content much faster, for LinkedIn, for blog posts, for different pieces, for the website, and just said like spin this up and try it. Not that it's the final version, but it would have allowed us to like move more quickly and not waste time on some of those areas. I also think a little bit about the sort of customer facing jobs. Like so much of the customer facing job is like aggregating everything that's going on, understanding it, and then like creating a deck and like presenting it back to the customer to then decide on the next step. To be fair, I haven't seen it done yet, but I don't think we're that far from a world in which you can basically say, right now there's AI that says like, how many calls did you do last month? Or like, help me make a slide with these 3 points. It'll do that individually. But I don't think we're far from a world in which you can say, basically like, ingest all my emails, ingest all the like voice, the transcripts of conversations we've had on Zoom. And based off of that, like, what are the three goals for the company? Give me a report showing the outcome, and put up a page for us to have like a brainstorm about what the next three things are we're going to do together. And instead of like having to have a human being do all that work, like I'll just have it do it for me, and then I can like present that, and then immediately move much faster and have a much sort of smaller team that's customer facing.
It's funny, customer success and even implementation more so would have been the one area that I also hesitate to say that I would have done anything different in terms of us doing it for a very long time at first to implement customers, understand their pain points, their needs, what's going well, what's not, because it's also the bridge between the customer and the product. And
Yeah.
so it really, not only is it about like convincing the customer with these three ideas and understanding their business, but it's also that feedback loop to like, are we even building the right product?
Yeah,
So
you
I would
definitely
say,
want to be involved. I'm more
yeah,
think it's more it's not that the AI would do the conversation, it's that it's the prep for every meeting. So like if you have one customer, like great, I can go and do all the prep for it. But now you have 10 and you go, shoot, do I have time to do prep for 10 meetings to have a great meeting to get that feedback? Well, no, so I need to hire a person. So if instead the AI can do all the prep for the meeting and I can now do 10 meetings without another person, I think that's going to be material. Like I say, I haven't seen it all the way there, but I've seen some startups working on this idea to see how you can aggregate all the data and start getting that in one place and starting to make those decks and sort of things. I mean, when I would make the financial statements, I think it's also materially different because to what we've talked about, there are so many opportunities to do this with fewer people. You don't need to actually spend as much money. So I think the way you sort of build the startup at the beginning can be much more efficient, either running off of your own sort of money, being like ramen profitable or whatever for longer, or if you're going to raise money, raise less money and take less dilution, or if you're going to raise the same amount of money, have that last you for longer. That's a material change to the logic. Like I think the mistake that I'm seeing is people are raising the same amount of money, if not more, and spending it the same amount of time or less, which is bad. Like, if you thought 3 million before in the old world should last you 18 months, now 3 million should last you,
yeah.
24 months or something. Otherwise, if you're just spending the money at the same speed, you're not like taking advantage of like the leverage that you're getting from the cost savings.
Yeah. I also think the advantage of feeling like you don't need to hire as quickly. I still think hiring your first salesperson, your first CS person, like those things still, your first engineer matter. And I think you should be as thoughtful as possible there. But it's about being able to give them as much leverage as possible too, before you feel compelled, like, oh, I've got to hire 5 engineers now or
Yeah.
5, 6. Because that's where things start to like very quickly get out of hand when you feel like you're the very first hire, like you've trained them, they've seen how you've done things, you've learned. It's a back and forth, a give and take. And then when you turn it on, you raise that round and you're all of a sudden like every team now is 10 people. That's where I
Yeah,
feel
it's
like,
much harder.
yeah.
Yeah, the other one I think about, and this was not my line. I was listening to somebody on the radio that said, "Well, why is AI trying to do the things I love, like paint and draw and whatever? Why couldn't it do my laundry and my dishes?" And so, like, I think a little bit of that also in the startup world, which is so many people are going after these like very high-end use cases, and I understand why. But to some extent, part of what was hard at the beginning of a startup was just like after my day job, I remember for like hours at night, I would do all the things like that are
It's
the
hard.
yeah, think about like HR and onboarding, think about all of the legal stuff, think about all of the finance and accounting stuff, think about all of the like I don't know extra work that goes on to I don't know rent and like office setup. Like there's stuff that happens. So like to some extent, if I could have AI do my laundry and my dishes, so I could still focus on the customer facing stuff, that would have been a massive transition. The other place I think about that sort of general concept is, it is a massive unlock at every company I've been at when I've had an executive assistant that's really been very deep in my workflow. So not somebody who's just sort of separate, but literally like in my email, on calls, helping sort of move things forward faster, understanding the context of what's happening. And I think still that can't be done by AI yet, but I don't think we're far from a world in which instead of just the executive having that, which is like the premium sort of like human being, every person in the company has something that's less but better than nothing, right? And has like a person that basically listens to all their calls, that they can take voice notes to and say, hey, please write this email to 3 people and set up these next 3 meetings, and that automatically acts on that. And so the leverage created from that would be
Yeah.
enormous across the company, because everybody, in the same way I have my executive assistant, they would have this leverage as well.
Yeah, just making every single person much more efficient at their job. And the pieces that candidly are hard to do, no matter how smart, how much you focus on the business content and all of that. It's just the pieces that have to get done.
Oh
And if
yeah,
you
I
can
like
leverage
can't
that.
tell you before I had any how much of my time was spent scheduling and basic stuff that, again, wasn't the highest and best. That's why I said that's not the only one, but the laundry and dishes analogy. So
Right.
how do you make sure that as a founder you're set up in a way that all that stuff can be done as quickly as possible, so you can focus as much of your time on what's really happening. I mean, the other one I think about is a lot of founders, haven't done this before. Like, we were lucky we had, but they're faced with something and they'll spend 2 weeks stressing out about, well, how do I make my first hire? Or how do I open an office for the first time? Or how do I fire somebody the first time? And if, they have advisors that can help them, or if they had AI that could help them understand what to do in those situations, just massively speed up those, so that they're actually focusing on the things that are going to move the business forward and not just these very operational pieces.
Yeah. One area you interestingly have not mentioned, like getting much more leverage out of AI in the early days, if we had done it, is in sales. Would you have done anything differently?
Yeah, to your point, I like the customer interactions. I think that is the critical piece of understanding how people are reacting. So I would have still done all of that. There's
What about the
definitely,
outreach? We did a ton of the outreach ourselves.
yeah, so there's definitely much more automation in the outreach that I think I could have done better with AI. So I've told you this story before, I should have hired the first BDR earlier, was the way I used to frame it. Now I think about it as I should have hired the AI BDR earlier. So somebody to help me with identifying prospects, sending the first email, maybe doing a little bit of an outbound phone call, not crazy things, but would have given me a little bit more leverage, especially in weeks where I couldn't do it because I was doing other things, so that would have been more consistent. So for sure, as founders today, I expect people to have those sort of systems set up. And now we've set it up because, now the AI is better, but we really had none of that when we were going outbound at the beginning.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're starting a company today, and your investor asks you about AI, it's not only about your product, it's also about how you make yourself more efficient. And I hope you're using this to, again, have your funding last for longer. As always, feel free to reach out to us at hello@regal.io. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Alex.